Our next discussion, Raising Your Voice, Driving Change, and Running for Office, would be led by Maggie Levy. Maggie Levy is a mediator and arbitrator with ADR Services in Century City. Before becoming a neutral, she was a litigation partner at Manat Phelps and Phillips, where she handled complex business, insurance, and ERISA litigation. She is a graduate of UCLA Law and a founding board member of UCLA Law Women Lead, and also serves on the Los Angeles County Beach Commission, the Board of Trustees of the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and several other nonprofit boards. Maggie is joined by several of our elected leaders who will share their experiences and insights on how we can use our voice to drive change.
Thank you. I wanted to, first of all, welcome you all and tell you how thrilled I am to introduce our panelists today. Seated to my immediate left is Los Angeles County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl, and to her left, California State Senator Holly Mitchell. And in traffic somewhere, we have Assemblywoman Luz Rivas, who we hope will make it here, but in the meantime, we will proceed. First, let me give a brief introduction. Supervisor Kuehl was first elected to represent the 3rd Supervisorial District in Los Angeles County in 2014, and she was re-elected to her 2nd term in 2018. Before she was elected to the Board of Supervisors, she served in the California State Senate for 8 years and the California State Assembly for 6 years. She was the first woman to be named Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly and the first openly gay or lesbian person to be elected to the California legislature. Supervisor Kuehl graduated from Harvard Law School, also known as the UCLA of the East. And she worked as a public interest attorney and was the co-founder of the California Women's Law Center. She's been a law professor at UCLA Law School, at Loyola and USC. And before that, she had a successful career as an actress on the television series The Many Lives of Dobie Gillis. Senator Holly Mitchell was first elected to the California legislature in 2010. I think they're learning something that they didn't know.
No, I was responding to the audience, so I'll tell you later.
Senator Mitchell represents nearly 1 million residents of the 30th Senate District, which includes Century City, Culver City, Cheviot Hills, Crenshaw District, USC, downtown LA, and a portion of Inglewood. Before she was elected to the legislature, she headed California's largest child and family development organization, Crystal Stairs, and she also worked for the Western Center on Law and Poverty. Senator Mitchell was the first African American to chair the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee. As a legislator, her priorities include reforming the criminal and juvenile justice systems, expanding access to health care, early care and education, and reducing the number of children growing up in poverty. Let me start our discussion by first asking Supervisor Kuehl, since she's had the most contested elections, what inspired you to run for office in the first place?
Well, after I got back from law school, I was asked by some of my former students at UCLA, because I had worked in Kirchhoff in the office that advises student organizations. Of course, it was during the student revolution, so they didn't want much advice, except how do I burn down the men's gym and not get arrested? And the answer was, you don't. That is, you get arrested. I was asked by some of my former students if I would be willing to serve or put together a board for the Sojourn Shelter for Battered Women, which was the second shelter in California. And I said yes and became very interested in the issues of domestic violence, and then beyond that, sort of everything about women in family law and decided to go into family law practice. And then I started teaching, and as a law professor and then at the California Women's Law Center, I was asked to help draft a lot of legislation about battered women, but also about women's rights in marriage. We couldn't even get our own credit cards in those days and our names, and so I would go up to Sacramento, to testify, and I was doing bills with Jackie Spear, with Lucille Roy Ballard, a lot of our colleagues who are now in Congress. And so you sit and you wait in those hearings and you listen to everybody. And I don't know if you're like me, but I always thought the next thing that I did, that everyone generally knew more than I did. They had come from a family with lawyers, or they came from a family with judges, or they knew all about these things. And boy, was I dispossessed of that notion, watching the members of the Assembly and the Senate on the Judiciary Committees ask these really stupid questions. And I thought, I could do this. And indeed, it would be a very good thing to do, because instead of just writing something and hoping somebody will vote for it, you could actually be in the middle of all of it. You could actually make the law. And so that's what inspired me really to run. Also, term limits came in, and they didn't have a stranglehold on the offices anymore, so you could run. It was really to make change, and primarily to make change in women's lives.
Senator Mitchell, how about you? What inspired you to run for office?
I got pissed. What I was responding to was during your introduction, Supervisor Kuehl, there was a young woman who made the expression when they talked about your acting career. She said, "Oh, that's interesting."
And very helpful when you make speeches in the Assembly and the Senate.
All the world's a stage. Yeah, I got pissed. I was a staffer working. I first met the supervisor in her capacity at the Women's Law Center, drafting those various pieces of legislation, and I was a staffer working for then State Senator Diane Watson, who stepped up and authored some of those bills. So that's when we first met. And so I'd been a staff. I'm that nerd. Always wanted to be involved in public policy development. Didn't have an interest in running for office because that's hard. Especially when I realized as a staffer how the level of influence I could have in shaping legislation. Well, I was a committee consultant, and I realized many of the elected members are going to base their decision on what I write in this analyses. That's power. And I enjoyed that. I was very comfortable there. I left to run Crystal Stairs' large child development organization that ironically was founded based on programs that public policy created that I'd analyzed as a committee consultant 10, 15 years prior. So they have the opportunity to have a full circle experience from looking at it from a public policy lens to implementation was a unique opportunity. So I'm running Crystal Stairs. It's 2008. The state is broke, and there's a proposal to cut $1 billion out of child care. We're organizing working moms and child care providers. We go to Sacramento to go to a budget hearing to talk about why that wasn't a good idea for the state's economy, for children, for working families. And the person who was chairing the budget subcommittee represented LA County and had decided to step down as chair of the budget subcommittee because he was running for another office. And I flipped my lid because he wasn't replaced by the LA County member. LA County has 1/3 of the state's children. So a group of 5 people, the subcommittees are small, was going to make a decision that would impact for generations to come the core constitution of the early care and education system in the state of California. There was no one there with the LA County lens. There was no woman on the panel. There was no one there even in childbearing years, Senator Kuehl. And I got pissed and had the same epiphany that I had this experience. I had been staff. I had run those programs. Who else had this full, from policy concept to implementation to operation experience? And so I could be mad at no one but myself if I didn't step up to the plate to try to be in a position to bring that experience to the table in making tough decisions about program cuts, program expansion. So in short, I got pissed and decided to run for office.
And I'm guessing that neither of you encountered smooth sailing in your initial forays into running for office, so I'll ask Supervisor Kuehl, what were some of the obstacles you faced as a woman and as an openly gay woman when you decided to run for office?
I really didn't know the kinds of obstacles faced by women running for office because I'd worked with many women who had been in office, including Senator Watson and, as I said, Lucille and Jackie and others. But no gay person had ever gotten through even a primary to get into a general election, much less been elected. That openly gay, of course. There were some who were in the closet. And so I thought, well, that could be a problem, but that's going to be somebody else's problem. Because my serious consideration was, am I going to run or not? And once you decide I'm going to run, then you know there's going to be people that are going to say bad things about you. It's even worse now because you have the Twitterverse and everything, which we didn't have in '94. But I got, death threats on my voicemail at home, a number of things. The main concern I had was that I really didn't know how to gauge the feelings of the people in my district. And that really was in a couple of ways. One of them was, did they want me to represent them, in which case I needed to ask them, what's important to you? And I quickly found out that they hated that. They didn't want to know what was important to them. They wanted to know who I was, because I'm going to make 3,000 different decisions in the first year that I'm up there, and I'm not exaggerating, and they kind of want to get a sense of who you are, what you're like. It was very helpful that I had played a very smart girl on television, because the assumption was that I was a very smart girl, and I mean girl. And so I actually went at it as though none of these critiques mattered. And I have, in every single election, I have never watched a negative ad about myself. I have never let anybody send me, do you know what somebody just said about you, kind of thing, because they're going to work their asses off to rip your guts out anyway. Why should you help them? And a lot of people are not able to do that, and I really want to say that if you decide to run, and you should decide to run, it doesn't matter what people say about you. You're going to hear it whether you're in a law firm or whether you're, in the smartest kid in the class here or whatever. But the obstacle really was I didn't know whether a gay person could be elected. And what it turned out was two things. One was people already knew me because of my character, and they liked her. So it sort of confused their thinking if they didn't like gay people. It's kind of like finding out your third grade teacher that you loved was a lesbian, and now you have to deal with it, or the nurse who saved your life in the hospital. And you have to deal with it. And part of what happened in my campaign without my pushing it was people sort of had to deal with it. Just like with racism, you have to kind of take out what you believe and look at it and go, you know what? I don't want to have those concepts in my life. I want to be better than that. And so it was an opportunity for a lot of people to say, I don't know how to think about that. How do you feel about education? What do you think about health care? And it became very clear that they wanted me to connect with things that were the same for me and them anyway, about education, about healthcare, about social services, about transportation, about public safety. As a woman, I think the issue really was many men are better connected in terms of raising money. But I really question that. For instance, if you had the names of everybody of Women Lead, and you ask them all for money, and they met you for 2 minutes here, they'll send you money. It won't be a lot, but if 10,000 people send you $5, it's the same as if 2 people send you $25,000. You don't need to know rich people. And you find that out at Crystal Stairs, you find that out at the Sojourn Shelter, you find that out in everywhere. Women can raise a boatload of money. And now, of course, that we do it on the internet, $5 at a time, it's starting to go our way. Really, because a lot of people say, I don't have much money, but I can send you $10. And if 1 million people do that, boom. So I didn't know whether I could raise the money, but I'd already raised a lot of money for the Women's Law Center, for Sojourn. I just had to do it for myself. And that is the last obstacle. The obstacle is people say, I could never run for office because I can't ask people for money. Well, then don't run for office. Because money is not money. Money is my way of saying, I believe in you, I'm not doing this, I want you to do it, let me help you do it. And what the money buys is the ability to tell people your story. It's not, you're not going to Mexico with it, you know. And so it is good that people give you money. It is good to ask them for money. You don't owe them anything. Do you know how many constituents I have in the 3rd District? Just guess. Not you, Stephanie, you know. 2 million. I have 2 million constituents. On any given day, 1 million of them think I just did the right thing. And they will send me money. It's love. That's really kind of what it is. So I would say the lesson is, don't let anything get in your way, especially not yourself.
Senator Mitchell?
Thank you.
Same question. What obstacles did you overcome, but as a woman and a woman of color?
I appreciate that. With regard to money in politics, we have gotten caught up into this belief in dynamics that, you know, all money is bad, and do you take corporate money, and therefore you must be a corporate, pardon my French, hoe, and that's what they say, Supervisor.
Never heard that.
I'm quoting others. And, you know, and my response to that is, like Shirley Chisholm said, unbought and unbossed. And I'm not for sale, and I'm certainly not for sale at $4,900, which is the maximum contribution a pop for a state senate. I'm not for sale for that. And so we have to be smarter and more mature about understanding the role of money in politics. Would we like to change the world and make it all clean money and all that? Absolutely. Until such time, and if we want to elect women, I'm going to suit up and play hardball. That's what we have to do. And I made that decision because, you know, why run for office in a term-limited environment with a school-age child as a single adoptive parent in a system with no pension unless I was going to go there and do the best I possibly could? Because I needed to be able to look myself in the mirror and say, did I make the right decision for me and my son to leave a job I loved that paid me twice as much to go in the middle of my income-earning years into a position that offers no pension and not bring my A game and try to hit it out the park? That would be naive at best on my part. So if you decide to run, then you're all in. And we have to change this paradigm about money. I am not for sale. Me fundraising to individual donors, PACs, corporate contributors empowers me to get elected, to communicate with my voters, and do what I came there to do, which was to lead and be a voice on behalf of those who don't have representation. So that's the money part. Second piece, it's interesting to hear you. I wasn't worried about whether, because I'd been a service provider and connected in the community, I was clear that I was the 47th Assembly District. I was just like the working families in my district who were out there doing valet drop-off at the elementary schools on Friday and running to T-ball and forgetting that it was my snack weekend and trying to pull in Costco on 2 wheels, and that was my life, like my constituents. The issue for me were the institutions who were the kingmakers and the queenmakers, who perceived me as Holly's very smart, she runs that nonprofit, blah, 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 but run for office, we don't see her that way. And so it was not my constituents, it was the king and queen makers in Sacramento who like to influence the options we have as voting residents of the state of California in terms of who's even perceived as a viable candidate. You ever ask yourself, what viable candidate, what does that mean? And so I stood there as a 6-foot-tall black woman with dreadlocks, single parent of a school-aged son, and said I am viable. And I'm going to show you my viability as I organize the people in my community, as I go to the other social service providers and say, We are fighting for our very lives and the very lives of the families we represent. Here is your opportunity to elect one from your ranks. CMA loves to elect doctors and pediatricians. Dental Association loves to elect dentists. Here's an opportunity for you to elect someone who knows the plight of the families you serve and how hard it is to run nonprofits who are trying to help California's working families. And they stepped up and helped me.
Supervisor Kuehl, what advice do you have for women who are considering running for office in terms of weighing the pros and the cons? And
The strongest thing that I would say to you, and I really do hope that you will hear this, is that I think every single person in this audience should run for office. It is not so special that only weird kind of people do it or different kind of people from me or from you. It is quite the opposite. It really requires someone who has experience in something, who understands sort of the day-to-day lives of people, not every single person. Better if you know your district, you've been living there for, a long time. But running for office, in my opinion, and I think those who've been staff, even top staff, like Dion Aroner from Berkeley, who was top staff and thought she did all the work for the member, and then got to be a member and said, oh my God, I didn't know they worked so hard, The greatest thing about it is you do not have a boss. No one tells you what to do. It's a little scary because no one tells you what to do. And Holly will say, yes, 1 million people tell me what to do, but if it's 1 million people, it's no one, right? Because like I said, every day 1 million of my constituents are on my side, and the other 1 million, I don't know. So I really believe that you should decide that this is a great way to use a JD. A great way to use a JD. There are not very many attorneys overall in office, and you really rule the room often. You will chair the Judiciary Committee, and it's extremely important. If you care about foster kids, if you care about family law, if you care about the way the courts are run, if you care about what's fair in the profession and the biggest rules, and if you care about the Constitution, or if you love the law, this is how you make law. Everybody else begs you to make it for them. But you would make the law. And it is an amazing opportunity, whether you're in the minority, which many of our friends have been for several years in the House and are no longer, or if you're in the majority, which is much more challenging, because then you have to kind of suit up and step up and make the law. But it is the most exciting thing. So if you're considering running for office, I want you to do a couple of things. One is review your Rolodex, which I know is not a Rolodex anymore, but you know what I mean. Review your database. Do you have 300 people that you can immediately send something to and say, it almost doesn't matter how much, will you support me? Or call 6 people that you know are going to tell you they're with you, so that you get that kind of feedback early. The second thing is, imagine your resume, imagine your bio piece. When you run for office, the first thing that you disseminate is your bio piece, so that people know who you are and kind of what you care about and what you've done. If you've never done anything, don't run yet, because, well, you get the stuff in the mail every time there's an election, and you look at it and you think, president of the school board, principal of a school, but also served on the governor's policy board for schools, etc. And you think, here's a person who did something, who stepped up and did something. So your resume should show that you did something, because your voters are going to want to say, how do I know she's going to do something when she gets there? And that's how they know. The third thing is, you need to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can do this. I know it really sounds silly, but you know you can, because I know you can. I had no more specialness or confidence when I first started than most people. But there were people who said, the work you've done with domestic violence, it's very important, we'll support you. The work you've done with women's rights, it's very important, we'll support you. But I want to come back to the notion that you have no boss. Think about it. It is fantastic. You get up every morning and you say, what shall I change in the law today? It's extraordinary. So that's what I would say.
Senator Mitchell?
I'll say 3 things. The supervisor told me the Rolodex thing probably 20 years before I first ran for office, and I didn't do it. Mistake. So even today, if you don't think you're going to run for office, do the Rolodex thing. Because even if you don't run for office, if you ever support a woman who does, you can share that Rolodex. That Rolodex is your resource forever to help you empower other women who are going to run for office or yourself. So please don't do what I did. Do the Rolodex thing. 1. 2, I bet there is not a room full of men anywhere on this planet with a panel of men trying to convince them to run for office. They go to bed at night and wake up the next morning and say, I want to be president of the free world. And he is. So we have to do better. Center for the American Woman in Politics at Rutgers University has done studies and research for years, and it's varied, but very little, that a woman has to be asked like 5 times before she does it. Come on, let's get over ourselves. You clearly, by virtue of being here, are some of the best and the brightest this country has to offer. Receive that, accept that, and make your decision to run. 3, and finally, when people come up to me and say, I want to run for office. Great. Why and what level of office? And then sometimes you get the deer in the headlights. And then I lean in. It's not about running for office for the title. These are very hard jobs. We work 7 days a week. Our salaries are artificially capped. Doesn't matter, the leader, chair of budget committee, I don't get a salary augmentation. I've had 70 bills signed into law by the governor. I don't get a salary augmentation because I have more laws thanks to Mitchell bills than my colleague. Your salary is set, the legislature, by a salary commission. There's no COLA, there's no nothing. So I left a job I love to do this because blah, 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 blah. The policy areas I am committed to that I feel I'm called to work on fall under that level of government. You will never see Holly Mitchell for city council, ever. City council does important work. I want 911, I want fire, I want the streets cleaned, I want the trash picked up. That's important work. That's not the work that calls me. So I ran at the state level at that moment of time because of what calls me. So when you make your decision to run, be clear about what's motivating you and what level of government, what office that resonates with. You follow me? Because just to arbitrarily say, I want to run for office, when I ask you why and what level and you don't have an answer, I'm looking at you sideways.
Supervisor Kuehl, I know you urged everyone in this room to run for office, but for those few people who may decide not to run for office, do you have some advice other than sharing your Rolodex, some additional advice about how they can help others who they want to support, candidates that are running for office who they want to support?
I think that I want to say there's 2 kind of sections to this. One is we talk a lot about running for office. At the time you're running for office, you are a candidate. After you get elected, you are not a politician, you are an elected. You are actually doing something. So there's kind of 2 ways, I think, to support women who run for office and support women who are elected to office, because they're going to be running again. As you know, if you're in Congress every 2 years, if you're in the state assembly every 2 years, if you're in the state senate every 4 years, or a supervisor every 4 years. in order to, if someone, your friend, someone here says, I'm thinking of running for office, I listened to everything Holly said, I know what all of the things I'm interested in, I've decided to run for the state assembly in my district, and I want to, emphasize issues of healthcare. And so, you can be a sounding board, you can give them feedback about the ideas, how they sound, whether they sound like, a person that sounds like you want to sort of put your trust in them, be a good sounding board. Secondly, you must throw a party for them in order to raise money and bring all your people in, and you will introduce them, and you will do a pitch at the end, and you will say, I want even more money than you already have given because Sheila's worth it. I want to tell you she's just worth it. We've got to get her there. And then after your friend is elected, you don't disappear. You don't necessarily call and say, I want to be appointed to the Beach Commission, which Maggie never said, but I wanted her. It just happened. It just happened. A lawyer on the Beach Commission, wow. But things that are important, sometimes you will say, I don't know whether you've considered this issue, but no one has picked up the issue of paid family leave, and I wonder whether you might be interested in it. And then sometimes it will just click with your friend. It isn't influence, it's really a kind of way of helping them expand their portfolio, because you may be involved in a group that helps children get adopted or permanent placement. You may be in something, that helps them. So I think it's not just helping people get elected, though that's extremely important. Be there for them before and after.
Senator Mitchell.
I couldn't agree more. There was, Ryan was in the fourth grade when I started my campaign, third grade in 2008, and I won in 2010. He was in fifth grade. And there was a mom that we knew each other from valet drop-off, and the parents in the school knew I was running and were doing wonderful things, and she saw me come in that parking lot on two wheels one evening trying to get there before the 6 o'clock drop-off. And she stopped me and said, I know you're running, and I don't really know anything about that, just because I know you, that I'm now paying attention. She says, but I can help you. How about I pick him up every day and bring him home? Every time I say it, I fill up. Because she saw that I was losing my mind and was trying to, and she figured out a space for herself. And she picked him up every day and brought him home. And she will never know what that meant to me and did for me. And so, in addition to sharing the Rolodex, figuring out how you can support other women. Because, women lead differently. Women govern differently. It is important that women are in the room, are on every committee, are in every public policy conversation to bring our collective lens and experience to those conversations. The outcomes are different when we are there. Unapologetically, period, end of sentence. They just are. And so if you choose not to run yourself, and you have the right, Supervisor and I would feel differently, but you have that right. Support a sister who is, and figure out how you do that. Everything she said, the parties, introduce her to the friends, but it's the other stuff as well. I've got I'm not a cook, so having a kitchen cabinet seemed like a foreign concept to me. So my core group, we call ourselves the shoe closet. So the shoe closet will call me and say, you looked great, da-da-da, I saw you, da-da-da. I have a bad habit, I say, because I'm trying to catch up. My brain is, those speech patterns you fall into when your brain is going too fast. And so I've got one that'll say, well, you only said 4 times in the interview this time. Or those that will say that color was good on you. All those things that we need to hear. Because being a woman in the public sphere ain't easy. And haters are going to hate, and they're everywhere. If you don't believe me, think about how many commentators and articles you read about Hillary Clinton's pantsuits. Compared
Kamala's
to
jacket.
Say it again.
Kamala's jacket.
Her jacket, yeah, right. Compared to how many articles we read about that too long, stupid red tie. It's hard. We are judged. Our hair, the clothes, why we do what we do. We're judged every minute. And so and some of those people judging are us. So we have to check ourselves and make a conscious decision about how we choose to support women who put themselves up and out there for the collective best interest of all of us.
I want to say also, just go see RBG for the 12th time. Seriously, there's such a lesson, a number of lessons in there from the very beginning.
I agree. Thank you so much, both Senator Mitchell and Supervisor Kuehl, for joining us.